One of the real advantages of electric cooperatives membership is having a voice in our state's energy future.
Not a week goes by without important energy issues making headlines. These are issues that need to be discussed. And you should know that as policies are being developed, the cooperatives are looking out for our members, advocating what's best for you.
We are your friends and neighbors.
We are your local electric company.
The electric cooperatives.
We are Arkansas.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock alongside David Goins. Joining us now, Rex Nelson and Democratic State Representative Warwick Sabin. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us this morning. Thanks.
Yeah,
David, I'll give you the first question.
First question goes over here, and thanks for joining the long table. I guess let's start with Senator Paul Bookout from Jonesboro, his resignation on Tuesday from the state Senate. Just as a colleague, being over from the House, your kind of thoughts on what's developed this week.
Sure. Well, I think most of us in the House and the Senate are glad that Senator Bookout resigned. I think it was important that he take quick action. Of course, there's been a special prosecutor already appointed, and we have to try to overcome this impression that the elected officials in Arkansas have an unsurmountable ethical problem here, because it obviously makes all of our institutions look bad. It makes all of us as elected officials look bad, and we need to assure the people of Arkansas that there are some of us who aren't engaged in these kind of actions, and we're going to take quick action against those who violate it. But on a long-term basis, as you might know, I had brought some ethics legislation forward during this previous legislative session. I'm going to be more motivated to do so going forward. I think my colleagues will join me, and we'll have a very serious package that we'll be able to work on a bipartisan basis. And again, get some of these rules passed so that what Senator Bookout did and what others have done won't be possible in the future.
I'm going to use some of Representative Sabin's word, insurmountable problem. Do you get a sense that there's this sense in the public that everyone's doing this?
Yeah, David, the thing that interests me as a political animal is what effect, if any, does this have on the 2014 elections, especially for legislative seats? The House is very much in play. Republicans hold a very narrow House majority, 51-48. Senate not so much in play, but still, what kind of effect does it have? And all I can tell you is what my personal experience has been in the past. I was Mike Huckabee's campaign manager in 1998 when we had the Nick Wilson scandal. Of course, Senator Nick Wilson ends up going to federal prison. Other Democratic colleagues in the Senate were indicted, and it helped us politically, quite frankly. So I think that is a question going forward, is what are the political implications going to be in 2014?
Of course, with regard to the legislature, but also with regard to the constitutional offices, you have a situation where there are members of both parties who have walked right up to that line or who have gone over that line, and whether or not that really makes it an advantage for one party or the other in this particular cycle, I would question. I think we need to try to come together on a bipartisan basis to address these issues to make sure they don't happen again. And I think, again, for one party to try to utilize these ethical transgressions as political tools in a campaign, I think is dangerous, because it's basically a thermonuclear war between both parties, and both parties are likely to be hurt very considerably by that.
Yeah, the fact is, though, that Bookout is the one who has been issued the biggest fine in the history of the Arkansas Ethics Commission, and certainly if he is indicted between now and that election, I do think it'll be used politically. Whether it's effective or not, again, I'm not ready to say that.
Do you think someone else will be digging around into other legislators and maybe
absolutely.
find something on the other?
I think that's already happening.
Yeah.
And again, after Martha Schaffner, we've had some issues that have come up with Secretary of State Mark Martin, Lieutenant Governor Mark Darr. I think again, we're going to see that wind its way through the process. But again, what we need to do is really come together as both parties to fix a system that's broken, give the Ethics Commission more teeth, and make sure that these rules aren't violated in the future.
Let's talk about this teeth that you're talking about putting into the Ethics Commission, because politically that's been very difficult to do over the years, because legislators have not wanted to self-regulate. Do you think that there's a threshold that's been crossed now where you will see legislators, because it could help you guys to have someone at the Ethics Commission actually overseeing some of your reports when they come in, and you flag those discrepancies early on and it doesn't build up for years? Rex, could you see that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. We live in that world where perception is reality, and I think the perception of too many Arkansans is that the State Ethics Commission is the proverbial toothless tiger, that too often on things people think, well, something should have happened more seriously. We have the letter of reprimand, and the letter of reprimand really doesn't do much.
Well, and really an $8,000 fine on $50,000 of misspent funds is
spending,
pretty small. I mean,
Right.
I mean, it's not apples to me.
Well, and the Ethics Commission's always been reactive instead of proactive, and it can only take action when somebody files a complaint, and I think that's one of the things we need to address, and I've always been in favor of giving the Ethics Commission more teeth. And just to be blunt and address your question, it has always been difficult within the body to convince colleagues to go ahead and take these kinds of actions, but I think we have crossed an important threshold. I also think the experience that I had this past session, where I worked with my Republican Senate colleague John Woods, was able to pass ethics legislation on a bipartisan, bicameral basis because we had the threat of a referendum at the ballot through regnant populace. That was really what kind of motivated our colleagues to get behind our effort. I think we can do the same thing in the next session and get some serious ethics legislation passed.
I would say, looking at the language of that, what you worked on with Senator Woods, is there anything in there? I mean, I've looked it over that prevents something like a book out situation.
Those were different issues that we dealt with there, but you know, I was the lead House sponsor along with Senator Bruce Malek on ethics legislation that would have prevented members from using their campaign contributions to pay for ticketed events, fundraisers, which is something that Senator Bookout did do. And also we sponsored legislation to prevent contributions from multiple corporations controlled by the same majority owner, which is another, again, questionable practice that we have. And so those things, along with strengthening the Ethics Commission and addressing some of these other, basically conversion of campaign funds to personal funds, we need to do that in the next session.
Again, to both of you, and Rex, I'll start with you. What do you think could realistically happen, though? What do you think the legislature would put into writing and actually take a stab at passing in terms of true ethics reform, some of this teeth that you're talking about putting in legislation?
I've got to be honest with you. I know Warwick was saying he was being frank, and I'll be frank. I don't think the legislature itself will do much. I think if something's done, if you're going to get a lot more teeth, it is going to have to be the voters of Arkansas and not the members of the Arkansas legislature. That's just based on many years of working with and watching the Arkansas
Rex says
legislature.
you can't do it, Warwick.
Well, I mean, again, I respectfully disagree, just because, again, we did it, again, with some pressure being applied from the outside, the idea being that if we didn't self-regulate, then there would be an effort on the outside by the voters at the ballot box. And so we went ahead and referred our own constitutional amendment. I will talk to my colleagues and I'll say, you know, if we don't do this ourselves, it will happen whether we like it or not. And in my case, obviously, I like it. And that was exactly what we did this last session, which is why I'm confident that after everything that's happened these last few weeks, we can go, you know, into the legislature in the 2015 session and pass some of this.
I hope you're right.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I guess one more follow-up. I mean, we've kind of talked about what happens next, but maybe for Rex, you talked about maybe the political, you know, advantage or something like this. I mean, the fact that other senators really didn't necessarily call for Bookout to resign. You didn't hear the governor do it. He did it himself. Of course, the governor came out and said, well, I would have, you know, if he hadn't. Is there a sense that maybe within the House and the Senate, people are not as inclined to accept change? You know, I mean, hasn't been a big call for, you know, Bookout to be this political boogeyman because maybe a lot of people in the Senate and the House kind of feel the same way.
I think it is somewhat an insular organization, not as much as it used to be, frankly, in this era of term limits and more divided government. I think it was much, much more a good old boys club, to be honest with you, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, than it is right now. But again, public perception going into an election is what counts, and what's going to be interesting to see is the average voter out there going to see this as a good old boys club, and all you do is take care of each other?
Well,
15 seconds.
Yeah, there were two things that happened. Personal relationships, which is what prevented some colleagues from calling for Senator Bookout's resignation. And then, of course, the idea that, you know, there are other members that are vulnerable to these kinds of ethics complaints, and I think that's what kept people from stepping out and calling for his resignation. But again, because that's bipartisan, I question whether this becomes an advantage for one party or the other. Both parties would be well served by coming together, sponsoring these kinds of, you know, reforms and getting them done in the next session.
Do you guys want to stick around and talk 2014 races?
Absolutely.
Be happy to.
Well, good deal. You guys stay right there. More with Warwick Sabin and Rex Nelson when we come back. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock, and you have the Capitol View on Sunday morning on KARK.
Bureau helps protect its members in more ways than you might think. They've always been the voice of agriculture in Arkansas, working on behalf of folks like me when nobody else would. And Farm Bureau stands for the values that Arkansas families care about. They've protected my right to farm and make a living, which helps everybody who likes food on the table. You know what they say, Arkansas counts on agriculture, and agriculture counts on Farm Bureau.
And welcome back to Capitol View. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock, rejoining our political long table this morning, Rex Nelson and State Representative from Little Rock, Warwick Sabin. Gentlemen, thank you for coming back for the block. Roby, you get that first.
Let me bring us to some things that are happening in the 2014 election cycle. And I actually want to do something a little off track here. I want to go to the congressional district down in South Arkansas, now Western Arkansas, a theory. You got an open congressional seat. It is Mike Ross's political battleground in the 4th District. It is also Tom Cotton's political battleground in the 4th District. And Mark Pryor has family history in the 4th Congressional District. Is the 4th Congressional District going to be the swing vote district in this next election cycle for statewide races?
I think it very well could be the swing district in both the governor's race and the U.S. Senate race. It's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that. Obviously, Mike Ross, being from Prescott, having represented a state Senate district for many years in that, and then representing that district in Congress, virtually his whole political career tied to that district, he is counting on big totals in South Arkansas, but it's a South Arkansas that is no longer reliable for Democrats like it was when I was growing up in the 4th District. In fact, it's nothing like the old 4th District. With the loss in population every 10 years, it's a district that takes in now large parts of West Arkansas, even North Central Arkansas.
And 4th District, advantage for Democrats or Republicans?
Well, I think there's an advantage for Democrats in this particular cycle because of the factors you brought up. The fact that we have Senator Pryor and Mike Ross both on the ballot. They're going to be pushing a lot of turnout down in the 4th District. I think you're also going to see the Democratic Party line up pretty solid for the nominee that comes out of the party, which speaks to a dynamic that you see a lot in this next cycle, which is basically you have a lot of contested Republican primaries, and then you have a lot of consolidation around a nominee in the Democratic Party, which of course is the opposite of what we've come to expect in Arkansas over the last several decades.
So Janice Percival is going to be the candidate that they surround themselves with.
I don't know who it will be, but I think that it's probably, we'll probably take some time to figure out who the nominee will be down there. But what I was going to say is, you know, I know that Rex and others talk about how the contested primaries on the Republican side signal health for the Republican Party, and I think that's true to a degree, but I think the dynamic at play here is that you still have a lot more registered Democrats in the state. I think when the party gets behind one nominee that it's stronger. I think the Republican Party still has a lot to sort out among its own primary constituencies between the more moderate Republicans and sort of the Tea Party elements. And so obviously the contested primary in the last cycle with Blanche Lincoln running against Bill Halter didn't help the Democrats. I think you're going to see a lot of that happen in this cycle. So that's a lot that I just presented there all at once, but I think it's a good jumping off point. And I see the 4th District being a very, again, exciting race for both parties, but really advantage Democrats.
Okay, the Senate race, obviously a very big issue on the Senate race. Tom Cotton has already made that clear. Senator Pryor's support for the Affordable Care Act. Not so much a Pryor Cotton question directly, but how much does this bleed into the 2014 session?
Well, I think everything is at play right now, and I think that's why it's such a fascinating year. My column earlier in the week in the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, I tried to point out the fact that we will probably have the most watched Senate race in the country going on in Arkansas. As we just said, we've got the 4th District congressional seat in play. We've got Republican primaries now, it appears, in at least 5 of the 7 constitutional races. We've got the House in play, whether it goes Republican or Democrat. This is unlike any election cycle that I've ever seen in Arkansas in my more than 50 years of living and breathing Arkansas politics.
Right, in the sense the Affordable Care Act was passed in Congress, yet it's such a huge issue inside the Capitol. Obviously, you were a pretty safe private option vote. How do you see the session maybe when it gets started trying to reauthorize money to keep this private option going?
Well, I mean, we've already seen, going back to the 4th District race, we've seen in the 2 of the announced candidates on the Republican side for that seat are Bruce Westerman and Mark Darr. They've already gone at it against each other over the private option vote even though both technically were on the same side of that issue in the end, which shows you the amount of divisiveness that's happening in the Republican Party. Now, obviously, that does put in jeopardy some of the votes, that we're going to have to get that appropriation passed in the 2014 session, because you still need, the 75 votes in the House and the 27 in the Senate. But at the same time, for Republicans to disown their votes really doesn't make any sense, because they just open themselves up to accusations that, oh, well, you were for it before you were against it, which doesn't really work that well. So I would encourage everyone who voted for the private option to stick with it. It's probably the safest political bet. I think that's what we'll see happen. Then that will have an effect on the primary that happens 2 months later. And again, I mean, the Democrats really kind of are in a bit of a stronger position now going into that cycle.
Let's broaden that out real quickly if we can, Roby, from what was done in the legislature to what happened in Washington. And it comes back to that old thing again, that Mark Pryor, Mike Ross can't explain their positions in 30 seconds. It comes back and you give a clear explanation in 30 seconds. The answer is no. The problem for Democrats, despite any of the explanations at the state level or the federal race level, is that Barack Obama is still going to be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue come Election Day next year, and we have seen in the previous 2 cycles that has been absolutely deadly for Democrats in Arkansas. I never dreamed I would see a president in either party so affect Arkansas politics as that
fastball that Democrats hadn't been able to hit the pitches off of yet.
Well, I'll just say, Barack Obama has become this crutch that the Republicans have been leaning on for so long.
But look at the last 2 cycles.
Well, but he's not going to be president in a few years. He's not on the ballot. Mark Pryor has been consistent. He voted for Obamacare, and he's been recently talking about the good that it's doing and that we need to let it play out. And Republicans, in their way, have embraced Obamacare by passing the private option in Arkansas. So I think it's the law of the land. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court. We need to see how it works. It could be a benefit for Arkansas, especially with our economy and the healthcare needs of the state. So at some point, that crutch is going to disappear, and the Republicans are going to have to talk about something else. And we've got a lot more to talk about in Arkansas. We've got jobs, education.
Unfortunately for Democrats, it will not have disappeared by November of next year. That's why we're going to see probably a 6-0 Republican delegation.
We're going to take you guys into our app extra here. This is Rex Nelson, Warwick Sabin. You're watching Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock with David Goins. We'll be back to wrap things up right after this quick break.
The Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce and Associated Industries of Arkansas. The State Chamber AIA is the leading voice for business at the state capitol and serves as the primary business advocate on all issues affecting Arkansas employers. Our mission is to promote a pro-business, free enterprise agenda and prevent anti-business legislation, regulations, and rules. Now more than ever, business matters. Learn more at arkansasstatechamber.com.
Welcome back to the Capitol View App Extra. We kept our political long table here a little bit extra. Rex Nelson, Political Animals Club President, Representative Warwick Sabin, Democrat from Little Rock, alongside David Goins over here too. Let's pick up where we left off here. You guys were debating at the end of the show how the 2014 elections are going to be impacted by the Affordable Care Act, by Obamacare. So Warwick, you made the last point. Rex, you were trying to counter that it's going to be a big issue. Is it not still? Is it the crutch that Republicans are relying on too heavily?
Well, it's the point I was making is whether they're relying on it or whether they should be or not. Barack Obama's still going to be in office in November of next year, and all I have to go with is the results we have seen in Arkansas so far. And since President Obama, rightly or wrongly, since he took office, we've gone from a 5-1 Democratic majority in our congressional delegation to 5-1 Republican, and we've seen Republicans take both houses of the Arkansas legislature for the first time since Reconstruction. The facts speak for themselves.
Is it wishful thinking on Democrats' part, Warwick, that they want Obama to not be a factor in these races? Well, he is still going to be a factor. As long as they're talking about him, he's still a factor.
Well, of course it's wishful thinking, and it's also just, I think, prudent and practical. I mean, at some point, Obama can't be the subject of every political conversation in Arkansas because we have so many issues to deal with, and quite frankly, it's a distraction. It's the shiny object that Republicans wave at us, to try to take our attention away from really important issues, on top of the fact that Obamacare is being implemented as we speak in Arkansas, and it's being implemented with the help and with the support of the Republican Party of Arkansas and a 3/4 majority of the legislature, which includes a lot of Republicans who are going to have to speak to that and defend that. Now, as Obamacare is implemented over the next few months, I think you're going to see people are going to recognize it as being not as bad as they were led to believe it was. It might even be good, in which case people are going to start questioning their judgments about that, besides the fact that Obama's not going to be on the ballot anymore. And again, we have other candidates that quite frankly, most Arkansans know and respect very well. Mark Pryor, Mike Ross, others who are going to come forward. And so that's what we're voting on. We're voting on our candidates, our people here in Arkansas, the issues that affect us, and not this sort of abstract boogeyman that keeps being presented to us.
So if Secretary Hillary Clinton announces she's going to run for president, I don't know, March of next year, Rex, all of a sudden, well, that's a better situation, right?
Again, Warwick uses that term at some point. Unfortunately for Democrats, that point does not come until January the 20th of 2017.
Right.
When Mike Huckabee is inaugurated as president of the United States. So.
That's how you know you're on the app extra, because that's never getting on the air right there. That's just for your phone. Your connection's still working there. That's good.
That's your wishful thinking right there.
Quickly for the governor's race here. You got 3 candidates in the Republican primary, only 1 on the Democratic side now. Rex, you've had them all come through the Political Animals Club. So tell me where you think that race stands today.
Well, we're clearly looking at as everybody pretty well knows, even though we've got a 3-person primary on the Republican side, we're looking at a Hutchinson-Ross race, and I think it's going to be very close. There's going to be a ton of money spent, a lot of campaigning, a lot of charges thrown back and forth. I think it's very much up for grabs. And again, it's fascinating because, as you know, Roby, it is our first governor's race in this state since 1966 that we go into a race without either an incumbent in the race or a very clearly defined front runner.
Right.
Even the ones that didn't have incumbents had a clearly defined front runner, and I don't think you can say either Ross or Hutchinson are a clearly defined front runner right now.
Well,
I give Ross the advantage. I think you're going to see more excitement in the Republican primary than most people are expecting at this state. I think Deborah Hobbs is a real X factor. She's, my colleague, state representative, and she comes from Asa Hutchinson's home territory. She's got the ability to raise some serious money, and I think she's going to give them a run for the money. I don't think that Republicans are necessarily all united for Mr. Hutchinson. And then on top of that, Asa has run 3 times statewide and lost, and I think Mike Ross, has shown a very stout fundraising ability. He's got the party behind him. He's going to be working pretty hard without any distraction for the next 8-9 months while Asa's holding off his primary opponents. And so I think when we come out of that cycle, I think you're going to see Mike Ross kind of ahead, and it's his race to lose.
Roby, do you remember that 66 governor's race?
I was almost a year old. I remember it like it was yesterday, David.
Rex just rattles it off like it's like it's a grocery list. Of course, the
Rex
66
race remembers the Jefferson Davis days.
Exactly.
Turn of the 20th century. I mean, come on.
Well, no doubt. I think Rex and Representative Sabin will probably be co-hosting or probably taking over for Roby or myself at some point. You guys did great.
Give me the keys right now, guys. Give me the keys.
There we go. Absolutely.
Great panel, and of course a great addition to the App Extra. We hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you next week on Capitol View, of course, on Channel 4 at 8:30 in the morning. But also, always check the App Extra on your iPhone, your Android device for great little tidbits like you just saw this morning. We'll see you next time.